Why, yes, every time I hear that song, if you're not woken up, you probably are now because fuck, is that a great track from the guys that Smash Into Pieces all the way out in Sweden. I am your host, Andrew Kahn. This is another edition of the Boomtown Pod, All Things MMA Season 2, Episode 11. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. And some crazy stuff happened, so I'm going to get that out of the way. First and foremost, we were so pumped to be joined by Reggie Hunt, and some crazy stuff happened where he just got busy. So that's what happened, and he'll be back on a podcast in a couple of weeks' time. So I apologize in advance. And Cole is actually on his way, my co-host. He's on his way back from Denver. So he was like, hey, man, maybe you get that Justin guy to come in. And I was like, this handsome fella? This Justin fella? I can get him in there. And so anyways, you may have watched our last podcast. Justin was a part of it. So, Justin, how you doing, buddy? Welcome back.
Good, brother. Thanks for having me again. Excited to talk about some MMA. We had some good fights just this last weekend, so lots to talk about.
That we did. A ton to get into, but first and foremost, we can't do it without the sponsors that you see down below. The Saskatchewan Podcast Network, Blue Collar Media Group, Stellar Gear, Sandman Boxing System, and of course, Connexus Credit Union. So with that being said, Justin and I were texting each other. This is the week that was sponsored by the Saskatchewan Podcast Network and the mothership Blue Collar Media Group. Well, unless you're living under a rock, you know that UFC 273 did take place this week, and things kicked off on the main card with a really interesting and weird matchup. Now, all of those that were, there's a bunch of people that texted me and said, why isn't Kelvin Gastelum fighting? Why isn't Kelvin Gastelum fighting? And I said, I know he was supposed to kick off this card. His opponent missed weight. So it's as simple as that. It's a tough break for Kelvin Gastelum, who had two opponents that were supposed to be booked for him. One got sick with COVID, damn it, and the other one missed weight. So instead, we got this fight that was supposed to be the preliminary card main event got moved up, which included a three-time Olympic wrestling champion and Mr. Madsen taking on Give 'em Hell Pichel, who might have the best mustache in the entire sport of MMA.
He's one tough guy too. That mustache. I messaged you right away. I said, this mustache is for real. This guy means business tonight.
And then he did.
I mean, tattoo too. Everything about the guy looks scary to me.
Yeah, it was a little weird. He had a weird back tattoo going on and stuff like that. And I was like, all right, well, this guy is from hell, I guess. But nonetheless, what it was 3 rounds of absolute domination. Pichel had his moments within the fight that he had some good counter strikes. He had a couple of that first round. I thought he came out really aggressively against a really good wrestler and Madsen, who's a 3-time Olympic wrestle champion. So he already was in a tough spot to begin with. And I thought he did really, really well. He didn't give Madsen a ton of room to move in there. He was really reducing the angles as a wrestler. Obviously, you want to shoot. Pichel was doing a really good job of taking that away from him. He put him up against the fence a couple times, and Pichel said, nah, dude, I'm going to hit you with a couple punches. And then that was the end of the first round. Then second and third round kicked in. And I just think it was a thing of the gas tank, to be honest. I think it just hit a new level for Madsen. You could really tell that the Olympic level of fighter was there, which was really, really cool. And you got to see how dominant he was as a wrestler. His hands were pretty good too.
Yeah, not bad. I mean, Pichel put up a really good fight for the short notice, like I was telling you on the messenger or whatever. Just like that first round, you could tell he was in it, and then you're totally right though. The gas tank. It was. I mean, Madsen just outclassed him the second and third round. And that was it.
Oh, and it was a massive outclass. And I mean, congratulations to Madsen who gets the victory. He is now 6-0 in the UFC. And he said it was actually John Anik brought up a really good point. He's like, at this point in my career, I'm 37. I'll be 39 when I want to retire. So it's a guy with a plan who knows what he wants to do. I see really good wrestling with him. I could see him being a champion. I just don't know if at 37, it's a young man's sport. And at 37, I don't know if you're really going to make a big push in this, right? I mean, it's not like he's fighting cans. I mean, like I said, Pichel was a really, really good matchup for him. But it's a crazy transition for him, that is for sure. But Madsen picks up the win. I really don't know who they're going to match him up against next. We'll see. But hey, great performance. Moving on to the second fight on the main card, we had Mackenzie Dern taking on Tecia Torres. And you know what? It was a good fight. It was a good scrap.
Very good fight, yeah.
I thought for the most thing, it was a really spirited bout between two girls who were in the top 10 of that division, who really just kind of left it all out there. I mean, Mackenzie Dern continues to impress me every single fight that she gets into, she just keeps evolving. And in this game, you have to be able to evolve. And, Tisha Torres, one tough customer, man.
Yeah, Dern definitely improved her striking though from her last fights. You could tell that was definitely worked on in her camp. I mean, when she gets somebody on the ground, good luck, you're done.
Yeah.
I mean, she's so good on the ground, so good grappling, right? So I think she worked on her striking, and it proved that because Torres was one tough cookie. She stood in there and took it and gave it right back too, right? So it was a good fight, though. I enjoyed that one.
Yeah, it was a great fight. You and I were texting each other like, we have no idea how this fight is going to go. Like, I mean, it was really back and forth, and it was a fans kind of fight. I mean, Mackenzie Dern, like you said, I think her evolution just keeps continuing to grow, and it's absolutely amazing what you're seeing. I mean, her ground game, man, every time she gets somebody to the ground, it's just immediately like, I know that finish is there. She's just that good, and her jiu-jitsu is that damn good too.
So good.
That, like, it's so quick for her. It's an immediate response. She gets in it. And Tisha Torres is a big girl. Like, I mean, she's very muscular. She's very strong, and it's not an easy takedown by any stretch of the imagination. But at the end, I mean, Mackenzie Dern was having her way with her. In regards to Tisha Torres, hey, keep going. Because, I mean, you proved that you can hang with, again, you're in the top 10 for a reason. So continue to develop off this fight. Maybe work on the ground game, like you said. But, I mean, Tisha Torres, there's a bright future for both of these girls. Mackenzie Dern is definitely going to be in the top 5 after this. I'm just waiting for the ratings to drop and where she's going to kind of be in the ranks. So we'll see what happens. I think Tisha Torres kind of floats and stays in that top 10. But, again, for both these girls, a lot of interesting matchups coming up. Getting into our third fight on the card, I think this is the card and the fight that everybody kind of had pegged as the main event. If you didn't watch it, this was absolute fireworks. I mean, Khamzat coming in undefeated. Gilbert Burns obviously losing to Kamaru Usman. And I mean, not a slouch of a fighter either, but it was Khamzat's first real test on taking in a top 10 guy like Gilbert Burns, who's ranked 2 in the welterweight division. So, I mean, this is a hard fight. And I have to give credit where credit is due. What a fight, man. I mean,
best fight. That was the fight of the night for me. I mean, going into that fight, before it started, I'm thinking, okay, this is probably going to last, 20 seconds, 40 seconds, 60 seconds. What's going to happen? Then it kept going and kept going and kept going. And Burns, I wouldn't want to get in the ring with that man. He's a tough guy too, man. But it was a crowd favorite for sure. I mean, look at it. He's coming up. He fought 2 fights. He fights him. Now he's going to get a title shot.
Yeah. Like we said, like, there's nobody realistically that you could put against Khamzat that I think kind of makes sense. I mean, if Kobe does win his next fight, I mean, Kobe, I think, would face Khamzat. I think that kind of makes sense for the number 1 contender.
I'd like to see Kobe get smashed. Yeah.
But I don't think he does against Khamzat. I really don't. Because Khamzat's pressure is good, but we saw something that Khamzat has never been exposed for because his fights never last more than 30 seconds. It's the fact that he got tagged, and he got tagged a lot. And Kobe
was it 122 punches I think he got tagged with? Is what it was, what they counted.
122 punches, man. That's a lot,
But I think Burns can take a shot too, though. I don't think Colby can take as much as what. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but
it depends though too, because you'd have 2 fighters realistically that haven't taken a ton of beatings. I mean, there are obviously, Jorge will claim that he almost knocked out. Well, almost counts in hand trees and horse grenades, but it didn't matter. You lost, right? So I mean, Kobe did his part, and Kobe was really precise that night. His punching was on, and he worked them. I mean, that was one thing that I have to give him credit for. So, and Khamzat landed flush on Burns in the first round, like just square dead on the chin. It was a beautiful punch, perfectly placed in time, and Burns just like got back up. And I was like, whoa. Like, I would have been dead for sure. So that was a crazy sequence. And I mean, and then, we got into the second round, and it looked like Burns was starting to have his way. It looked like he was like, all right, kid, you've now gone through the first round. Khamzat looked gassed for the first time. Again, it's hard because you don't know what this kid is capable, because he's only ever fought 3 times. And when he has, they've been 20 seconds. No one's ever landed a punch on him. Right?
It's crazy, man. It's crazy to just, I mean, hats off to him too, right? I mean, for not being punched in how long? I mean, it's got to be a long time. And to go through that and take hits from Burns, I mean, that guy's got some explosive power, and he connected on a few of those where he had him stunned, but he just didn't finish it though.
Yeah, even in the third round, I wish this was a 5-fight round. I really do.
Yes.
But even in the third round, you could just see that Khamzat was slowly fading, and Burns was gassed too. Let's not get that confused. But just the power that Burns had in those punches in the third round, I said, man, there's no way. Like any normal man is getting killed by that punch. Like even gassed. I was like, wow, this is crazy. But yeah, explosive fight. For me, it's definitely one of the top 5 fights in the past year, for sure. I was happy to see Khamzat get the win. The hype train continues. I had a couple friends reach out to me and said, do you think the hype train's derailed? I would say that it's on pause. It's good. He's a good fighter, but he got exposed in a lot of ways against Gilbert Burns, who has fought for a world title. So, I mean, there's a lot that's going to go back into Khamzat's camp with him and Darren Till. They seem to be like best buddies, which is awesome.
Best buddy. You see him on top of the octagon there when Burns was coming out. See, I thought, okay, he's being a little too cocky, a little too light right now. I was a little concerned with that, but I mean, I think this doesn't hurt him. I think it helps him in a way. I mean, it shows Dana White that this kid can stand in there with the best of the best, right? So
I think you also realize a very important lesson that you can't take people who have fought champions lightly. And we can say all we want. I don't think he took Gilbert Burns as seriously as he needed to take Gilbert Burns. I think the world slept on how good of a fighter Gilbert Burns is. I mean,
agree.
Obviously me covering this for, the last forever, I know how well Gilbert Burns' hands are, but I didn't realize how much power he consistently had. I mean, he almost knocked out Usman. He was about 10 seconds away from winning the title. So, I mean, he does have heavy hands, and he's the first guy to ever stun Usman too. So, I mean, that's a big, big accomplishment alone. And I mean, Khamzat got to face that kind of competition. So obviously we all know now that if he doesn't get Kobe, Khamzat doesn't get Kobe, he's obviously going to go and fight Kamara. And that's going to be the matchup that they're probably going to make. And you and I both agreed. What does he do next? Well, we know how the UFC works. He's likely going to get the title shot.
Where do you think Burns goes from this? This is a risky fight for him a little bit too, eh?
I still think Burns needs to – I would like to see Burns fight Covington. I do.
I think that's the matchup,
They're just such great fighters, man. And that division's so stacked. I mean, 170 is just lights out. It's been years since we've had a 170 division where fighters are like consistently good, Like, I mean, the GSP era, you had some, GSP and schlubs, really. I mean, he beat tin cans for a long time. I mean, I'm not discrediting those fighters because they're much tougher than I am. I'm just saying when it comes to competition from this era to that era, it's just so different. So
totally different. I agree. Yep.
And people continue to get better. MMA evolves so much, like a guy like Tim Sylvia, for instance, a former UFC heavyweight champion. If you were to fight in the UFC now, he'd get killed. Like even in his prime back then, like, I mean, he would get destroyed against Ngannou, or he would get destroyed against Brock Lesnar or Frank Mir, even, some of the older guys. Like, I mean, it's a crazy reference. Daniel Cormier probably would kill him too, but yeah, nonetheless. So, I mean, great for Khamzat. The hype train, I do say, is not derailed. It's just on pause. We'll see what happens next. And for Burns, he has no need to pout or cry or be upset about the finish. I honestly, personally thought he won the fight. And I only decided that the only reason why Khamzat won was the takedown in round 1. Because
that was huge. That was huge.
Massive. I mean, realistically, like I said, Khamzat was outboxed the entire time. And Burns landed with ease. I think he landed on 54% of his punches, which is absolutely insane.
122. Crazy.
Yeah, like that's a nuts amount. It's a lot of volume, right? And to continue that throughout 3 rounds is just crazy. So I thought ring control, I think Khamzat did a really good job of cutting off angles for Burns. But Burns was the busier fighter, a lot more active. Yeah, he got taken down in that first round, but that first round could have been, like I said, I just think that one takedown specifically is what won it for Khamzat. So congratulations, Khamzat. Awesome fight. The fans, we are the people who won. We are the people who won that. So moving into our next one is our co-main event of the evening. It is a rematch from UFC 259. Of course, Aljamain Sterling, the champ by a disqualification by Peter Yan, obviously kneeing an opponent when it is down. Everybody says Aljamain, milked it a little bit. Whatever, man. Rules are rules, and that's why they're there. And I get tired of talking about this. Everybody's like, "Oh, Peter Yan should be the champ." No, really, he shouldn't. He cheated. That's just there's rules in place for a reason, right? If you strike it down to opponent, I mean, that almost happened in the Khamzat fight. I think Khamzat tried to throw a kick, and he almost hit Burns. I was like,
very close.
if he would have connected, that would have been a disqualification. So it would have been a shitty end to a great fight. But of course, this is a rematch taking place. Aljamain Sterling, Peter Yan 2. And for all intents and purposes, I was a little split on how this fight was judged. I think you were also on that boat. I think Sterling did. I've watched it again. I think Sterling did enough to
First
edge
round.
out. First round is what won it for him.
That's it.
A couple takedowns, and Yan looked a little flustered. Didn't like it. I mean, and there's some ground control in the second and third that he had, not for long, but it was enough. And Yan won definitely the fourth and fifth round. Like there was no. It
was almost embarrassing watching Sterling trying to take him down in that last round there. Like it was just like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Oh man, but this is the classic case of don't leave it to the judges, man.
Yeah.
Yan had to finish him. He could have finished him. He didn't, right? You can't leave it.
Yeah. And that's the best example, man. Yeah, and you're right. You can't leave it in the hands of the judges. For a bajillion years, it's been the rule of MMA, and you can't do it that way. And obviously, Aljamain Sterling, it's an emotional.
He looked good.
Win.
He looked okay though. He looked okay the first few rounds. He looked good. Yeah.
Like I'm glad he ended up getting that neck surgery. I think it did wonders for him. I think it probably prolonged his career for a couple more years. And honestly, like I just thought he outclassed him at times. I mean, Peter Yan. Saying that he won the fight and that he's a champ and all this other stuff, man. Until you beat the champ, you're not. So I mean, you can have the interim belt all you want. It doesn't make a lick of a difference. I think Peter Yan is still obviously the top 3 best fighters in that division. And then at the end of the fight, we got a really interesting call out from Aljamain Sterling, who said, TJ Pillashaw, TJ Needleshaw, TJ whatever you're below ground zero Shaw. Yeah, and TJ was there in attendance. I mean, he said, you're next. And I mean, I honestly think Aljamain wipes the floor with TJ. I didn't think TJ was that great or impressive against Corey Sandhagen. So, I mean, I think Aljamain probably wipes the floor with Dillashaw. But
I think so too.
I just think he's just a better fighter. I mean, Sterling is just a more complete fighter. Dillashaw, again, coming out off of his suspension, fought Corey Sandhagen. He ended up getting the win via decision. I didn't think he did enough to win it. It's still very controversial in my mind. I thought Sandhagen won. But nonetheless, that seems like the call out, and it's probably the matchup that gets made in that division next, which I just find bizarrely weird. I wanted to see Peter Yan and TJ Dillashaw. That was the fight that I was hoping for. And then they match up
nice, eh?
Yeah,
that would match up pretty good.
For sure it would. And I think that gives Sterling a chance to rest a little bit after, again, like he just had neck surgery. Everybody's like, whoa, what's his medical suspension's going to kick in? He's probably going to be about 3 months before we see him in the octagon again. So, give me Yan and Dillashaw, but who knows? I'm sure that, again, we know how the UFC works. So just
it's a weird one, man. That's Sterling. I don't know. Sterling bugs me for some reason. I know. I should probably give him a bit more credit though, because he came in and he got the belt back, right? So like he kept the belt. So
you got it on Aljamain Sterling at plus 375. I'm sure there's people out there that made a ton of money on that fight.
I know. I called it on your Facebook thing, but I never put any money on it. I'm like, oh man, I should have.
Yeah, I mean, he looked great in that first round. Second round, he looked pretty good in. The third round was kind of split for me. I don't really know who won, but fourth and fifth was so decisive it wasn't even funny. But anyways, that goes into our main event where we had the Korean Zombie Chan Sung Jung taking on Alexander Volkanovski, and this went exactly how I expected it to. Chan Sung Jung is a MMA legend. He is a pioneer of the sport. The Korean Zombie is just an absolute legend. But Volkanovski is that much better than everybody else in that division, and it showed. Oh,
big time.
My God.
Yeah, I don't like that. I was hoping that the Korean Zombie would come out with a bit more, but he was right from the get-go. He was confused on where he was in the ring. I think like he just didn't know what was going on, and he was letting them tag him left after. Like just everything was going right in on him, right? So it was, like you said, the main event could have been probably switched around a little bit on that one because that fight really wasn't. It wasn't too entertaining. But I mean, hats off to Volkanovski. I don't think he gets enough credit either. I mean, he's definitely an underrated champion for sure. But I think he's probably one of the best pound for pound guys right now, man. He's a monster, and he's just so confident in himself too.
Well, and it's crazy. I tell a lot of people this, and I show the before and after pictures, and people don't believe this. But at one point in his life, he was 240 pounds playing rugby in Australia, and he's the 145 champ.
Crazy, man. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Like,
I saw that side by side picture. He looks like he's just like a short, just jacked, and then to 140. Like what? And then
it's
fight how he
insane.
fights.
And he's constant pressure. I mean, he's beaten the likes of Max Holloway twice, who maybe is arguably the best boxer in that division, or maybe in the UFC. So, I mean, Volkanovski, I think, like I agree with you, is a very underrated champion. He dismissed all these critics who thought, well, if Chan Sung Jung takes him to the ground, it's probably over, and all this other stuff. Well, guess what? You got to take him to the goddamn ground to get the chance to win. But I mean, from the get-go, he I have heard so many times by so many people that they want the judges or the fighters, and their corners to step in respectively, or even have the official to step in respectively. I mean, when Volkanovski hit that 1-2, Herb Dean did the best fucking job that I have seen an official do in a long time, and was like, grabbed Volkanovski by the shoulders and was like, yo, he is fucking done.
The zombie wasn't going to give up. He's a tough son of a gun too, man. I mean, he took a lot of punishment there, and for him to stick it out to the end. I mean, yeah, Herb made the right call. He saved his life, man.
For sure. And of course, at the end, it was pretty emotional. Volkanovski gets the title. They go over to Chan Sung Jung's corner, and Chan Sung Jung takes his gloves off. He puts them in the ring, says a little prayer, and we all know what that means. That is the end of the Korean Zombie. So all of us here at Boomtown and the fans worldwide, man, we are so thankful for, the neck twister tie that you created. Mm-hmm. Some of the craziest submissions you've ever seen. I mean, at 34 years old, I don't think he owed the sport anything. And I think he knew that if he couldn't beat Volkanovski, he's just not going to be able to beat the best in the division. So why prolong, keep taking injuries, keep getting hurt, He's a guy who's been in the UFC for 14 years, so it's not like he's not a name at this point. I just think he went out with class. He was great about it in the interview, and just said that was it. It was awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hats off to him, and that was a great career. And I mean, the head twister thing. I remember that years ago.
Crazy.
It was wild, man. Wild.
I remember watching that. I was like, what the fuck is that? And they're like, oh, that's the twister. I'm like, I ate a ice cream twister earlier. Is that what it means when your guts are tied up? Like, I mean, I don't.
probably felt like that, man.
For sure, especially if you're lactose intolerant. So I mean, yeah, it was a pretty crazy career. But congratulations to that guy, to the Korean Zombie. Hats off to you, man. We again are.
So who's going to be Volkanovski? Who's going to come in and challenge Volkanovski? How he looks right now?
Well, we'll get into that because it's gonna transition into that perfectly for who I'm going to talk about in a bit after this. But for some boxing news, because we cover everything here, Ryan Garcia. Now, if you have been living under a rock, like I've said, you have never watched Ryan Garcia hype videos. This guy is 23 years old, born in 1998. Okay, has a pedigree of just fucking wins. It's insane how talented this kid is. He's been on YouTube. You've probably seen him on TikTok videos. You've probably seen him on Instagram. The kid who's fucking doing the bunches and punches. He's insane. Anyways, he was back in a massive win over Emmanuel Tagoy this past weekend, which good for him coming back. A lot of people kind of wrote him off against a older, much more crafty veteran in Emmanuel. And honestly, it was a great performance. Did you catch much of it, Justin?
I didn't catch much of it, no, but I'm definitely a Ryan Garcia fan. Though I've seen a few of his fights, and then just keep watching like YouTube videos. And I remember the one where he punched Jake Paul in the abs there, and made Jake Paul go to the bathroom and puke a little bit. So that was a good one. Yep. But no, he's a talent, man. This kid's a winner. I mean, it's good for boxing. They need to have some young guys in like that going forward. So I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, you got the Crawfords, and of course you've got. I hate saying this, but you got your Jake Pauls who are keeping the game kind of relevant in boxing. I mean, it sounds terrible to say things like that, but I mean, kind of gone are the days of Klitschko and the Ali's and all that other kind of stuff. Where I hate saying it out loud because I mean, if Cole was on here, you'd be like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Hey, man, this young man's sport. I mean, like these guys are being found off of TikTok and all this other shit, and it's kind of crazy. I mean, the way that things have happened and." and where boxing is going. I mean, it just kind of seems everybody wants to go that way because the money's huge, first and foremost. It always has been. So, I mean, guys are really chasing after that. But Garcia is an absolute freak. More news for you guys. So we're kind of going to get into this. It sounds like from Kamaru Usman's management team that he might be leaving the UFC for a boxing fight against Canelo Alvarez, which would be fucking crazy. There's a lot of working parts around this. If you guys can recall, when Conor McGregor fought Floyd Mayweather, Dana White was a very large presence during the press conferences, during the media, during the boxing event itself. McGregor Promotions was a big part of it. So I'm wondering if they'll do the same kind of thing with Usman and see if they'll sponsor it by the UFC, or if they'll do like an Usman Promotions, or and I know that he has ties with like Francis Ngannou and all those other guys. So I wonder if they'll do like the Nigerian Nightmare, perspective of it and stuff like that. So it'll be really interesting to see, especially with Israel Adesanya as well. So if this happens, do you think there would be that kind of hype that there was for Floyd and Conor with Usman and Canelo, Justin?
I don't think there would be as much hype. I mean, they would definitely gain some attention, but you got to remember who that last fight was. It's Conor McGregor and it's Floyd Mayweather, the two of the biggest trash talkers that are out there. They sold that event just for that reason, right? So I don't think it'll be as much hype. I'd hate to see Usman leave right now. I think he's got some matches that are coming up in the UFC that are going to be great fights. So to see that happen right away, I think it's kind of lame myself. But I mean, the money's there, and I mean, if Dana's not going to pay for these super fights in the UFC, then I'm chasing the money too, brother. You got to chase the money, right?
Yeah. If ever was a time for Usman, I think, and I agree with you, but if there was ever a time for Usman to leave at a stretch right now, I would probably say now would be a time, because he's starting to lap that division, right? Like, I mean, he's beaten Masvidal twice. He's beaten Covington twice. Like, he's starting to get to that whole circling phase. So it'd be interesting to see. If it was a time, I think it would be good for him to go now and go make that, $2 to $10 million paycheck and just be so well off for the next little while. I mean, it's crazy what could happen. I mean, Canelo would probably make $45 million minimal in that fight. Mm-hmm. So crazy. If it does happen, it'd be interesting. I'm all about it. I'm definitely going to watch it for sure. No doubt. And then we have some other news, of course. Cowboy Alex Oliveira has walked away from the UFC after 22 fights. Writing was kind of on the wall. We talked about it ever so briefly last week when I said when he lost. I said I don't know where they really go with him. He was calling out, some other guys that have lost some fights and stuff like that. But he probably ends up at PFL and or Bellator. Those are probably the two organizations that he ends up at if he does not retire from combat sports just in general. We'll see. I like how he's fun, man. Alex Oliveira is always fun. He's just not a great technical fighter anymore. So props to him in a great career in the UFC. 22 fights is a lot of fights, man.
Yep. No, he was definitely entertaining to watch. Like I said last time, he's a pretty good dancer, right? So hats off to him. Good career. But I think time's catching up to him on this one, I think.
Yeah. We kind of briefly discussed it earlier. TJ Dillashaw is next, it sounds like, for Aljamain Sterling. I don't agree with it, but we kind of briefly talked about that earlier. We can kind of move on to the next point, which brought us up to why you think, or who I think should fight Alexander Volkanovski next, is a man that has now just entered the USADA protocols. That's former champion Henry Cejudo. He has officially entered the USADA protocol, which means he has 3 months to test negatively. Then he can be re-entered for fighter status into the UFC, and I'm assuming that's where he's going to go. Right now, currently, Cejudo has been doing a lot of commentary for Eagle FC, which is Habib's competition, and his little fight promotion down there. So, I mean, Henry's been busy. He also runs a really great podcast, a really good one with like Mike Tyson's always on there, it seems, and just a lot of other guys. But I think, honestly, and you asked me who I think is going to fight Volkanovski next. Well, it's the guy who never lost the title to begin with. Henry Cejudo retired voluntarily because he wanted to have his kid. He wanted to get married, and he did all those things. He's had a life after so far in the past 2 years. But I think if ever was a time for him to insert himself back into the division at either 135 or 145, which I think he's going to come gun blazing at both divisions, now's the time. Henry Cejudo, an Olympic champion, a former 35, 45 champion. He's Triple C for a reason. And the guy is cringe. He is the cringiest guy in the UFC. but he comes back. Do you think he makes an immediate impact, Justin?
I think he does. Yeah. I mean, the guy's a champ for the reason, right? And like you said, he didn't leave because he lost a fight either. So as long as he passes, gets through the next 3 months. I think Volkanovski needs a challenge like that, because who else is going to fight him? Who else is going to bring a challenge like that, right? So I think that's the fight to look for. But I'm sure he's probably going to have to fight someone else before he gets that shot. I don't know who it would be though, but I think that's probably what'll happen. I don't think he'll come right into the title, but he might.
Yeah, they'll make an intriguing matchup for him for sure. I think he'll get a big name right off the get-go, a top 3, top 4 kind of guy. I think realistically, I agree with you. He probably shouldn't get the title fight right off the get-go. But let's face it, it's the UFC. This is how they do things. Dana White's crazy, and money talks, man. You want to put asses in the seats? I mean, I love the UFC. It's a well-oiled machine. It's a tycoon at this point. It makes billions amongst billions of dollars every year. But I mean, realistically, matchmaking has had its up and down in the last little while. It just seems like guys call out people on social media and are immediately getting title fights that don't deserve it. I mean, I like Jorge Masvidal, but he's not a champion, man. He's just not somebody who can call out title fights. I mean, give me a resume where you start working for it. Like same with Nate Diaz. I love Nate. I'm a Diaz guy till the day I die.
Love Nate.
Dude, you haven't won since 2018. You can't call people out anymore. Like, but as soon as these guys get on social media and they start calling out, Dustin Poirier is getting called out by Nate Diaz, and I want that fight to happen so fucking bad, so goddamn bad. But I don't know, because it's like Dustin will talk shit, Nate talks shit, Nate goes quiet for like 4 months.
But that's what Dustin wants, though. He wants the big money, just the super fights, right? He doesn't. That's what he said last time he fought.
He's been to the dance twice. He lost both times. I think he understands that he can't beat Charles Oliveira because Charles is just an absolute monster. And his weakness is wrestlers, man. And Dustin knows that. So, and he's lost the 2 times he was in title fights, Khabib and Charles Oliveira. 2 of the best wrestlers ever in that division. So, I'm excited to see Henry Cejudo insert himself into the UFC. I think he goes to 45 right away and tries to make some noise. All right, moving on. Part 2, Into the Future. It's sponsored by Sandman Boxing System, Saskatoon's premier boxing academy. And also, just want to give a quick shout out. Cole, my co-host, would normally be here with us today. He actually went to Denver this past weekend, but the weekend prior, this guy's crazy. He does a whole bunch of shit in a small amount of time. He went to Regina, and he went and fought for the heavyweight championship, gave up 40 pounds, and still won, ladies and gentlemen. So that guy is an absolute goddamn monster. And if you want to learn how to box, hit up Sandman Boxing System. They do some.
Forget about boxing. How about let me cut 40 pounds?
No shit.
Unreal.
He texted me and said, "Should I take this fight?" I said, "Well, is it for the belt?" He's like, "Yeah, it's for the heavyweight strap." I'm like, "Then go for it, man." But I'm like, "How much are you giving up?" He's like, "Oh, my opponent's 6'4" and like 260. I'm like, "Dude, you're like 6'1" and 220. What? You're giving up reach, height, and weight, and he still won." So,
good for him.
My boys he's got a heart of a champion. He's always going to be one of the best, and I'm always happy to have him on here. And I'm so happy he's a co-host, and he continues to kick ass and doing whatever he's doing. So shout out to him, right? Props quick. So I said, like you said, go check him out, Sandman Boxing System, if you're in Saskatoon. The other nice thing that they do with Sandman Boxing System is they actually do YouTube workouts. So if you want to learn if you want to get in shape like we've been doing, trying to get some pounds off, a lot of their stuff you can go on YouTube. They do a monthly subscription too. I think it's like $25 for a month, which is less than $1 a day to get your fitness in. They do some incredible stuff with weights, without weights. So, I mean, between Cole and Demi, they've lost a whole human being in the last year and a half. So, I mean, it's been crazy how much weight he's lost. I remember when he was about 300 pounds, and now he's fighting at 220. So, I mean, it's absolutely incredible. So, yeah, checking them out, man. Love those guys. Anyways, let's look at some future matchups. This is where we make money. This is where we try to predict things. This weekend, we got a very different fight night. I didn't want to talk about too many of the fights because it's kind of weak. I'm not going to lie to you. But that's because they probably spend all their money on the next card that we're going to talk about in a couple seconds. But Belal Muhammad, who's been on a roll, is going to be taking on Vicente Luque, who's been also on a terrorist roll as of late. His ground game has been absolutely spectacular. Belal Muhammad is an incredible wrestler himself. Vicente Luque has some great hands. He showed that against Tyron Woodley when he fought him. And Tyron's known notoriously for having heavy hands. Luque was the better fighter that night. Belal Muhammad's been on an absolute tear. I am, all intents and purposes, going to be rolling with Belal Muhammad in this fight. Justin, who are you going to roll with?
I'm gonna go opposite, buddy. Luque for the win, man. I think he's gonna tap him out.
And I mean, he probably will. Vicente Luque has just been on a murderer's row, and he's been so good. There's really not a glaring hole in his game lately. So, I mean, he comes in his camps, and he's been very, very well off. With that being said, let's go into Bellator. I know we don't talk about it as much, but I do have my credentials with them. I love the company. I love the organization. I've been backstage for the past almost 2 years now with them, which has been incredible. But we have some really good fights. Corey Anderson, as some of you UFC people know, has come over from the UFC over into Bellator, and he was part of the Grand Prix tournament with the likes of Rumble Johnson, Yoel Romero, a bunch of names, Ryan Bader, all those guys. And this is for the championship fight. Nemkov ran through his area, and Anderson ran through his. So now Corey Anderson finally gets that world title fight that he has been wanting so badly, and he earned it to get there. And I'm really looking forward to this matchup. Vadim Nemkov is an absolute monster. I got to talk to him probably about, I would say 6 months ago before his last fight against Phil Davis. And Nemkov literally said, "I will smash everyone," in Russian. And I was like,
Ooh.
Okay. That's creepy. And Vadim Nemkov has done exactly that. He's beaten every single person by smashing them completely. So for me in this fight, I really think Nemkov will probably pull off the victory. He is a favorite in the fight, but Corey Anderson has been on this run, man. It's been an unbelievable run. He left the UFC because everybody doubted him there. He did win his last fight in the UFC, went over to Bellator, which is strange because a lot of people don't do that when they're, winning in the UFC. But he said, "I want to beat these guys, and I want to be in this tournament, and I want to prove that I can do this." Not only will he win the title if he beats Nemkov, he wins $1 million.
Yeah, so I think it's a good storyline for Anderson for sure. He could come out and take him.
For sure. And Corey Anderson has proved to me all year so far that his wrestling has been incredible in this tournament. His hands have been electric. His cage presence, his alertness and IQ as a fighter has been very, very strong. And this is a great matchup because Nemkov matches up against him perfectly. Vadim is a monster fighter. And like I said, anytime you interview somebody and they say, "I will smash everybody" in a thick Russian accent, he's for real. I probably would not fuck with him. And also on that fight card, we have AJ McKee, who is coming off a win against the man that he's going to be facing. Of course, Patricio Pitbull. Man, this has been an incredible matchup. Obviously, AJ McKee beating Patricio for the title and winning the $1 million prize as well during their last Grand Prix, which was spectacular. AJ McKee is one of the best prospects in MMA. If you have not watched any of his fights, I am telling you right now, go out and do so. AJ McKee is now 18 or 19-0. I have to check one of those two. I think it's 18-0. And he's taking on Patricio Pitbull, who has really ran Bellator's division for a long time and has been a champ for quite some time. So, he's hungry. He's got the nickname Pitbull for a reason. He's going to get in there and go.
Yeah, I think McKee's probably going to take it again, I think. But the Pitbull's going to put up a fight. And I'm a big Pitbull fan, so hopefully puts on a good entertainment for everybody.
Patricio Pitbull is just one of those guys, man. He's just a legend of the sport too, especially with Bellator. And AJ McKee, like I said, is an upcoming prospect who has just literally silenced everybody. And I think when he beat Pitbull, I think the whole world went, including myself. I watched the fight and I went, "Oh shit! Like we have something on our hands here." So, I mean, the $1 million hasn't changed. AJ being a champion, he's still a very humble kid. He's still working, and watching the videos of his training seems good. Their face-off was today, and he looks probably in the best shape I've ever seen him in. So Patricio is going to have his work cut out for him, if you will. Anyways, moving on to UFC 274, Cowboy Cerrone taking on Joe Lozon. The loser of this fight, I think it's done.
I think so
it's
too.
Game over. I mean, realistically, Donald Cerrone doesn't know the game anything. Joe Lozon doesn't owe the sport anything. These guys have both had 25-plus fights each in the UFC, which is absolutely unheard of. And I honestly think that if Cowboy wins, we'll likely see him retire in a win. I don't think he would want to fight again if he lost, and that's why I'm saying whoever loses this fight is likely done with the UFC. And I mean, just the legend of Joe Lozon too, this Boston kid, tough as nails. has fought every single person pretty much ever in the 155 division. Man, just nostalgic factors. Me growing up on these two guys was really huge for me because they really introduced me to sport at a young age. So I'm quite excited to see these guys either go out on top or somebody's leaving, you know?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. It's going to be too bad, though. I love watching Cowboy. I mean, he's one of my favorite guys to watch. But again, time catches up. This is a young man's sport. I mean, they've at 27 fights.
Yeah, I think again a winner takes all type deal. I mean, the guy who wins probably retires anyways, and the guy who loses is going to be cut from the UFC. I don't know if there's a market where they go to a different organization and they do it. I mean, both guys are 37 years old. It just doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. But I mean, this fight, nostalgic purposes, they're going to come out. You know, they're going to come swinging because it's going to be the last fight. It's going to be a brawl, and I'm so happy that's the fight that kicks off this card. I think it's going to be fantastic. My heart says Cowboy, just because Cowboys give me so many memories in the sport. So I'm rolling with Cowboy. UFC 274 also has another interesting matchup, which could be another last matchup if we really look into things. Ovin St. Preux has been one of the better fighters in that division for a while. Shogun Rua is a former champ. Mauricio Shogun Rua, if you guys don't know who he is, go look at some of his highlights. It's pretty crazy. Just don't watch the John Jones highlight because it's not for everybody. Absolutely gets killed in that fight. But nonetheless, I'm really looking forward to these guys colliding. I do think that if Shogun loses this fight, I think it's the end of Shogun with the UFC, and OSP definitely needs a win after losing a couple here. And it looks like he's been kind of worked in the last couple of fights. Obviously, if you haven't watched an OSP fight, he's known for the Von Flue choke, where he literally just pushes his goddamn elbow and essentially bicep into your throat and not being able to make you breathe. And he holds the record with 4 of them in the UFC. So
nasty.
Yeah, it's very nasty. It's crazy when guys actually submit to it. You're like, he's just pushing his bicep on you. How much can it actually hurt? Meanwhile, buddy's dead. You know, like it's just grasping for air. It's crazy. But all intents and purposes, I'm probably going to roll with OSP in this fight. Justin, who are you rolling with?
Yeah, me too. I mean, Shogun, does he ever go away though?
I think it'll be part of a brand ambassador role. Like he'll be.
He's got to be. I agree with you there. But OSP, I think, is going to come in. He's got a bit more to prove right now versus Shogun. I mean, Shogun's there to fight. Obviously, he's always been a tough fighter and a tough competitor, so he's going to put on a fight. But OSP, I think, has a bit more to lose on this fight than Shogun does.
Yeah, I mean, OSP, I think, still has a career in the UFC. I think he needs this win after a couple of losses, like I said, and he kind of got worked in all his last couple fights. So, for all intents and purposes, I'm going to roll with OSP. You're rolling with OSP. Shogun's probably. Yeah. I mean, Shogun's going to get the MMA All Star legend treatment. I mean, when you're a former champ, I mean, look at Forrest Griffin, for instance. I mean, he's like a personnel rep for the UFC. He's like a hype guy. I mean, they probably pay him millions of dollars a year just to be like, hey, come to the UFC. You know?
I guarantee they don't pay $1 million a year for that. They don't even pay their fighters, man. Come on.
Forrest Griffin probably gets paid quite a bit.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's millions, but he probably makes a good fucking penny.
Yeah. We'll say that for sure.
I would say that. Of course, and then we have a matchup that's interesting in that women's division. Tricia Cortez taking on Mrs. Gatto. Now, Tricia Cortez, if you don't know who she is obviously the significant other of Brian Ortega. So if you haven't watched her fight, she is a badass who comes first all of the goddamn time. She is one of my favorite fighters in this division. But God, Mrs. Gatto, she is crazy, man. Her punches and bunches is something to watch. Her wrestling is immaculate. I'm going to roll with Cortez in this fight. I just think she's got a lot to prove, and she can continue making her push. And I want to see her get a title shot sometime. So I'm going to roll with Tricia Cortez in this, Justin.
I don't know. I'm gonna go against you on this one. I think it's gonna be a crazy fight, though. I think it's gonna be fun. I'll go Gatto.
Okay, cool. There we go. Easy enough. This one I think is on everybody's fight calendar. I think this is circled. This is like my Christmas present in April. I'm really looking forward to this one. Michael Chandler, one of my personal favorites. I've always loved him ever since, I mean, the dawn of time when I first started watching him. Bless Chandler. He's fucking crazy, man. But he's also taking on a guy who's on a bit of a losing streak, who's, I think, pretty much everybody has written off at this point, Tony Ferguson, because of the age factor, because of his recent performances. He's not quite the killer that he used to be. And I think people have pretty much thrown out Tony Ferguson being the old Tony Ferguson. But I am saying this right now. Old Tony Ferguson is going to come back, and he will beat Michael Chandler. I'm going against my own guy. You know, it's pretty crazy. I would never think to go against my own guy. What?
I didn't expect it. I think you're right on this one though. Ferguson come out after losing that last fight. I think he learned a little bit there, and he's gonna have a good camp and come out pretty strong. So it'll be a good fight though.
I hope so. I think if you're a matchmaker, like obviously Sean Shelby, the matchmaker, decided this was going to be the fight that everybody wants to watch. He nailed it because we're all going to tune in. It's just like Khamzat and Burns. The third fight of the night is going to be like the best fight of the night, I think, on this card. It's going to be crazy. I am rolling with, like I said, I think I'm going to roll Tony Ferguson. His back is against the wall in a massive way. But so is Michael Chandler, because if Chandler loses this fight, that's 3 in a row, and you just got signed to the UFC, man. That's not a good look. So, I mean, I'm rolling with Tony. My heart says Michael Chandler probably wins this if he connects pretty hard on Ferguson's chin. But Tony takes him down, man. Ferguson's ground game is elite.
I'm taking Chandler. Chandler's going to knock him out.
Yeah, honestly, I agree with you. This could go either way. For me, this is going to be the hardest one for me to pick this year on a pick 'em for sure. I just have no idea. I'm gonna have to sit down with Cole and really make executive decisions on that one for sure. But anyways, we'll get into our co-main event of the evening. Thug Rose taking on Carla Esparza. It's the second time these two have matched up against each other. This is the women's strawweight title fight. I'm telling you right now, every time Thug Rose is on a pay-per-view, your ass is watching it because she is that exciting of a fighter. And Carla Esparza is on a roll. 5-fight winning streak.
Well, looks like Andrew's computer crashed out, power went out there, so I'm just going to close this off on this one here. I think Thug Rose is going to come out and smash again. I think she's going to win this one. I don't know how it usually ends these podcasts, but thanks for everybody for tuning in. I'm going to sign out.